Hi guys, welcome back. You asked for more Virgo on Virgo grumpiness and random tangents and us talking and griping about things. So you got it. We're here. Stephen is back from A Witches Society. If you didn't catch it last time, all links will be down below. Although go check out the other video because it's funny. And we talked for way longer than we were anticipating about all sorts of stuff and not talking about things that we were supposed to talk about.
Yeah.
Because we went off on one.
And now we're talking about something completely different. So okay.
We have a list because Virgos.
Yeah.
Whether we will stick to the list, we don't know. We're not sure. So the main topic today is going to be like influencers within spiritual circles. So we're going to be talking about a few different bits to do with influencing, what influences are, where we've come across them, some different sides of that commercialism that comes around because of that sort of thing, and other Virgos got the list. So did I miss anything?
No, I think you got it. And we said that we probably have about 12 tangents in between all of these bullet pointed lists.
We've allowed 12 tangents.
Yeah. I'll keep a tally of the amount of tangents we go on, and when it hits to 11, I'll give us a warning.
Yeah, like blaring sirens in the background. Everybody else freaks out. We'll be like, "That's our 12 tangent warning." All right. All right. So, what would you say an influencer is then?
Well, if I'm honest, I don't know if I like the word now, but I definitely had a problem with the word before. And then I actually joined Instagram and stuff, and then suddenly I was an influencer and people are calling me an influencer, but I still find the word a bit cringe, if I'm honest. Just me personally. I like kind of what it stands for at a base level. It's people that can have influence and a voice over something. But then whether or not that's used for positive is another story, I think. In terms of what I feel like an influence is, it probably is that simple. Someone who has influence online. You know, some people turn around and say we're all influencers. Everyone's an influencer because we all have friends, we all have family. Yeah. We all have a platform. It doesn't matter how big that platform is. Word of mouth is super powerful. So things like posting videos, writing things online, that is part of that word of mouth. You know, it's not technically, most people who have a platform don't pay for that platform in terms of, like, because Instagram is free, for example, making a Facebook group is free. You could pay for advertising on it, but those are free platforms that a lot of people take advantage of, and that gives you a voice. But even just having a normal Facebook account, you have influence over people because people could have like 300 or 400 friends that see their posts. But I don't know too much about Facebook. I left Facebook a while ago, so.
Yeah, I think the problem with the whole influencer thing is there's a difference, isn't there, between maybe what it began meaning and what it's become. It's almost become weaponized in a way. It's really strange, and there's a lot of bad behavior associated with people who call themselves influencers, and I think a lot of people see this idea as very self-important. It's like you're giving a title when you haven't earned it, for whatever that means, but that's kind of how it's seen, I think, en masse. I think it can be put to really great use. It can be put to really important use, and then, as with everything, some people are going to be using it and abusing it to make money and there's nothing wrong with, on the surface of it, making money, because we both make money, we both work, and everybody presumably out there works. It's just, you know, spiritual people get a bit touchy about when you make money in spiritual circles sometimes. But I think what the real issue with that is when the authenticity doesn't line up with the influence. So when people can sense that something is off, or people sense something is fake, and then you get into even more problems, because there's an element of social media which is always going to be fake by design, because you're getting a snippet into somebody's life, you're getting their on stage images, you're getting their well thought out quotes, you're getting their best bits, right? You're getting their highlight reel. Most people don't put like their worst days on their influencer platforms, whichever social media platform that might be, because there's many now. Like people go on to like Instagram, Facebook. You can argue for Twitter. Twitter's a little bit less, just because there's less of a dynamic. Well, no, it's more of a conversation than it is like images per se. On
Yeah, I
Twitter.
feel like Twitter's quite a bit more punchier because everything is shorter. There's a character limit, and the things that I see Twitter being used for the most is things like politics and humor.
Yeah.
And I think there's a place where they collide on Twitter as well. And I think that's different, because I don't think there are people who, as much as you would, I think in order to be a certain kind of influencer, you have to have a more visual element. And Twitter is more, I don't know, I would say that it's more, it makes you think a bit more, Twitter. And there's a lot of like arguments and debates on Twitter that I see, but I'm quite new to Twitter in general. I only recently joined that, and that's mostly just to post rants, which a lot of people use Twitter for. So yeah,
that's entirely what Twitter is all about, ranting from
amazing. I think one thing we were going to touch on that wasn't originally on our list, but has come up in the last couple of days. You're gonna make me mad, aren't you? I might make you mad, but I'm also mad about some things. And I think that it's because we've seen a lot of these accounts, and I'm just talking, this isn't exclusive to like the overarching spiritual community, including the witch community, but there's a lot of accounts and brands within that sector that are very much love and light, for example, and very much like, here are some crystals, here are some lovely quotes, here's some affirmations, all of that kind of things. I'm not insulting that, I'm just saying that's what they are. And they're the people that are being silent now, when a lot of most of the accounts that I see are speaking out against what's going on. And I think the accounts that have been preaching the most love seem to be the ones that I'm seeing are very silent, especially brands, especially brands that cater to or have a target audience of the pagan community and the witch community and the spiritual community. And I think that I'm seeing them under fire now. A lot of people are calling them out, which is another thing that, you know, is part of that whole influencer culture. Links into, there's a lot of backlash over a lot of things. I've had some backlash. We've had quite a lot of backlash over on Witches Society. The post we recently did has reached over, I think, 150,000 people now. We've kept some comments up because we did a post addressing Black Lives Matter. We've got a highlight on the go. We've got loads and loads of resources for people, but usually that page is like a share page. There's an aesthetic element and there's an educational element. We're not a business. There's a few admins on that page. We're not a business. We don't accept money for anything. We don't do any paid advertising, but we decided to use that platform to make that stand. And some of the comments have been brutal and very draining. And you've experienced that as well. Like, some of these comments have been so disgusting that we've had to delete and block people. You know, it's our choice what we keep on the page and what we don't. And if there's something that we've decided is very discriminatory, we've got rid of that. And some of the comments we've kept up because they actually are a testament to why we need to keep fighting as allies. And sometimes that's important, but some of them have just been so despicable that they're actually doing the opposite. Rather than proving the point, they're causing pain to other people. And so we've been blocking them. And quite a lot of those comments are coming from younger people, which was a bit shocking to me. And yeah, we've been taking it in turns, going on moderating comments. And I think as it stands right now, there's over 500 or 600 comments. I think there was more at one point, but we did delete some comments that then deleted a chain because the people were being so horrific. But yeah, I thought that would be interesting to just kind of raise that. I think it's important. A lot of people consider being a witch in itself a political statement.
Yeah, well, I was saying this to you, and I think that it bears worth repeating, is if we take the title of witch, for whatever reason that we take it, right, and it's a very personal one, and some people won't, but if we do, how can we then be silent about persecution? Because by taking the title of witch, you're taking everything that goes with it in that history. And I'm a historian. I freaking love history, and I will tell people like I really don't like the whole, you know, we are the granddaughters of the witches you weren't able to burn. And I say I don't like it because the people back then who were being burnt as witches wouldn't have identified as witches, right? But we reclaim the word now to mean something else. We reclaim it to honor people who did die. And maybe they were healers, maybe they were shaman in the village, maybe they were midwives, whatever they were, but they got labeled as witch, and it was unlikely in most circumstances that they would have identified that way. It's a weird subject in history. Some may have, but I'm not saying nobody did, but mostly they won't have.
I think it's a grey area for a lot of it as well, because obviously what's that phrase, like, history is written by the victors?
Yeah,
exactly. So we're never like, there's a lot of it, it's just going to be a blank. Yeah,
and a lot of what we have about that, historically what we have document wise, is written by like witch trials, the legal system, and then the horrendous men behind some of the witch finding stuff, right? But regardless, tangent number one. If we
I'm actually going to tally these.
Yeah, there you go.
Sure.
Regardless, if we take that now, if we take that title now, we take everything that's gone with it. We take the fact that people are persecuted to this day in some places in the world under witchcraft. Like in some places in the world, you get called a witch, you're not safe. You're going to get stoned to get death. To this day, and we, in our, you know, relative privilege in this side of the world, can take that title and have relative freedom with it. We still might come into some kinds of problems depending where in the world we are. You know, some people discriminate in jobs and things if they know that you're pagan or witch or whatever. But generally speaking, we have the freedom to take that title. And if we then don't stand up when we see and know that other individuals are being oppressed, are being persecuted, are being hurt, are being murdered in their beds, there's a big discrepancy there. Like it's almost like this title kind of has a responsibility with it to stand with people. At least I think it does. I mean, I've been shouted at for telling people what to do and all sorts, because apparently me saying what I think is a good idea, it equals me telling people what to do.
And that's something we spoke about earlier, because on my personal account, I haven't really had a lot of backlash. On the Witches Society account, we don't have really like a face to that profile. We occasionally, the only time you really see the admins is when it's one of our birthdays, and we do a little birthday post. But we deliberately need to take a step back, because that account isn't technically for us. It's not for us to be like, hey, we're the admins, etc., etc. But on my personal account, I haven't had that much backlash. I've actually had a lot of praise, which has made me feel a bit uncomfortable, because I didn't do or say the things that I'm saying for praise. I don't need praise over that. Doing the right thing in this instance to be an ally doesn't require me to get validated for doing that. But I understand where people are coming from. I understand that people want to thank you. But it's mostly been like a lot of like white folks just thanking me for doing it, and that is lovely. It has made me feel a bit uncomfortable, but I haven't got the backlash on my personal account. And I think some of the things I've said have been quite gritty or quite intense to the same level you have, but we've seen that you have got more negative comments. And again, that's what we were discussing earlier, that I think that boils just down to, honestly, sexism.
Yeah. It's my face. It's my voice. Who knows? People like to argue with me. But I will say, in terms of people being silent, I've actually had people that I considered friends in the past tell me that I shouldn't talk about politically volatile stuff, being on YouTube and being somebody who sells physical items to other witches. You don't want to rock the boat because then people won't buy from you. And I found this argument heinous. I was like, oh my, ugh, that's horrible. Like, lie to people and pretend that you're like nicey in the middle and you're not getting involved just because you see them as like pound signs or dollar signs, depending on where you are. I thought this was awful. And then today I actually had somebody commenting, and their shadow was poked, I think is fair to say. But then they were telling me off for not speaking nicely enough to people who support me financially, people who buy from me. And I was like, I don't know what to do with this statement, because this is why some people will be being silent right now, because there's a pandemic on and people are afraid of their finances anyway, because everything's up in the air with a lot of finances and a lot of jobs, and there's that struggle right now. And so if people truly believe this and they're afraid to speak up because they're afraid they're going to lose like all of their financial support, I can see that as a cause of fear. I don't think it's a justified one. I think, no, you should just stand up and say what you think anyway, and the people that are going to stand with you are going to stand with you no matter what. I mean, there are people dying, so that is way more important than finances, which can be remade, recovered, and all the rest of it. But I can see that being one of the reasons that people are being silent.
Yeah, but I think what you've just highlighted is actually a very one of the most toxic points of privilege, because if somebody, I mean, I work in customer services, you know, and I've worked in retail jobs most of my life, and like when someone turns around to anyone and their argument basically is, I pay your wages with my custom. Essentially, that's what they're saying to you, like, be nicer to people that are paying you money. That is a white privilege way of saying, I still believe in slavery.
Yeah.
You are my puppet because I'm paying you. So you can't speak about X, Y, Z because I'm not paying you to do that. I'm paying you to make this or to do that or to give me a reading or to make that bottle of oil. So when people turn around and say, I pay you, you know, I pay your wages, so you should do X, Y, Z, that's 100% privilege, and it's 100% from a mentality of colonialism and like slavery. And you know, if people are saying that to you, and if people are saying that to other people, I take that as a sign of almost like victory, because they're outing themselves and they're exposing themselves as who they really are, and other people can see that. If that makes sense. I think that's probably our second tangent there.
Yeah, you're putting that on the list, are you? Tick. Second tangent. But this is what I mean when I say, like, it's a really weird, precarious world in some ways when it comes to like this influencer culture, because if you have a voice, then suddenly people think that they have a right to control your voice. And everybody has a right to their opinion, right? But not you don't get to force your opinion down somebody's throat. And it's really interesting to me that when I get passionate about anything, there is immediately somebody telling me that I'm trying to force them into thinking how I think. And I am super careful the way I phrase myself, even when I'm angry. I'm proper English guy. Like, I'm not technically, genetically, but when it comes to like arguing, it's very Virgo, very English, very making sure I get my points across properly, with proper enunciation and careful like navigation of not saying things which leave in doubt what I mean. So there isn't going to be pitfalls of people going, you meant this, and I'm like, no, I didn't. But it's probably universally true that no matter what you say, somebody is going to be committed to misunderstanding it. And that's one of these weird things of influencer culture, that no matter what you say, and whether you say it in text or in out loud on video or whatever, somebody is going to take it completely differently because their experience of the situation is not the same, and so they see it from a different perspective, and or they have an unhealed shadow around it maybe. So it's a very strange, when you think about influencing other people, it's actually really strange, because in a way it's like you can't truly influence somebody, right? Because you can't brainwash somebody unless you're flat out brainwashing somebody, which is a whole other area. That's like cult. I feel like that's a tangent right there, waiting to happen. But then somebody said to me the other day, like, I feel like we're living in times dictated by Charles Manson right now. And I'm like, I can see that, because that's kind of what it feels like.
Yeah.
But generally speaking, for most people, right, for most people, and we have to be careful of that, because spiritual places, you can get cult-like behavior. But for most people, they want to engage with people who are influencing, right? They want to have a conversation, they want to have a debate, or they want to have an argument, depending on the individual. And so how far do we think that influencing people can go? Like, healthy, sound in mind and body individuals who are not being influenced, because that's something else which we'll get into later probably when we're talking about the problems of influencing. But like regular individuals who are not in a mentally troubled place or anything like that, how far do we think that can really go?
I'm not sure, because I think part of being an influencer is about gaining people's respect. And to do that, I think one of the key things is that you have to be quite authentic to yourself. I'm a very private person, so you won't see all of me on my page. I barely even post like a selfie either, because it's just not my style. So I think if people, for myself, I'll use the example of my book reviews. Now, I'm really, really open about those. I'm very fair with those. I think I'm very proud of that. I will talk about the things that I think are pros and cons. I'll talk about the things that I think the book, even if I don't personally resonate with the book and it's not as useful to me, I'll know who that book might be useful for. And I'll say, if you're this kind of person, if you're this kind of practitioner, if this is an area of interest, this is for you. You will enjoy this. If you're not, you probably won't. I don't want people to waste their money, and I don't want people to waste their time reading a book that's not going to benefit them. I don't accept payment, but that's just me, because I know some people do. I know some influencers do. I don't take any money from anyone, any organizations that send me anything, and I very rarely get anything sent to me. I say no to most things in my inbox. But I think in order to actually influence people, if people are going to follow you and mimic you in certain ways, or read the same things as you, or do the same practice as you from like a witchcraft perspective, they have to have respect that you're actually authentic, and that you are wanting to actually help them in some way or do something for them.
But then you do get the cases, and it's not as frequent in the spiritual community, which is interesting, but it does happen, where people do hoodwink people en masse and become an influencer. Because the woman's name escapes me, I can't ever bloody remember her name, but I know that she had a pink wig, and I know that she influenced a massive amount of people, and she was making out she was spiritual, and she was selling things to people, and it turned out it was all crap, and it was bought off Wish and repurposed and sold as high, that she had made them herself, which she hadn't, and that she'd spellcast over them, which she hadn't. And she had a massive audience on, and pretty sure it was Instagram, and she had managed to do that, and none of that was authentic. So it's a really interesting thing to me, because I'm the same as you in that, like, I hold my authenticity to like this high standard, #Virgos, and like Virgos are harder on themselves than any other star sign, by the way. Like, legit, we hold ourselves like way up here, and like to this standard that even we probably can't manage to meet all the time. But to me, selling spiritual things, it's like it has to be authentic, because I mean, as a witch, I know if I've ever bought something from somewhere and like to try it out, and then I can't feel anything like spiritually behind that, nothing is more disappointing to me than that. Like that is really disappointing, really off-putting. And so when I'm creating things, like I started off, I can't really do it anymore because of time, but when I started off making products, I would put them on video, show them on video, and tell the whole story behind the energy of something, because it's accountability. It's telling people it's not just a candle, it's a story, it's a soul, it's an energy, it's a message. You can tap into this, you'll be able to feel it. And people have people have messaged me over the years going, I can feel the energy of this, I couldn't believe it. And I'm like, that's really sad in some ways, that how many spiritual things have you bought in your past and you've not felt anything. So to me, I absolutely agree that it's really, really important to be above board. Now, that being said, I do post selfies. This is my the year of reclaiming my body and being glamorous. It was originally what 2020 was supposed to be. It's interestingly not quite as we anticipated any of it with the pandemic, but hey. And so to me, I originally was quite against the idea of selfies. I kind of found them shallow originally, and what was actually happening was it was my shadow with that. So I didn't feel good in my own skin, so I was looking at other people and I'm feeling like, God, that's fake or whatever. And that was my shit to deal with, and that I'm still dealing with. And so I was like, right, so if we're going to flip that on its head, then I have to show selfish and explain why I'm doing it, which that makes the most sense to me. But some people will still see lots and lots of pictures, particularly of you, of your face, and decide that you're fake. Like I've had men, now admittedly not pleasant men, like men that follow lots of different women just to be nasty to them. So it's not the most legit of opinions, but they will be like, oh, you're shallow, you mean nothing, you have no depth, blah blah blah, because you're posting pictures of your face. And so it's this really interesting, weird world of influencers, because some people absolutely 100% mean it, and they slowly build up audiences and develop that mutual conversation, that mutual respect. And that's what a really authentic influencer is. And then some people manage to present an image of what people believe to be authentic, and they're really good at it. They're really good at presenting images of what people think is real. Or maybe what people wish was real, like what they wish their life was like. And I get like that about some of the witchcraft stuff online. Like there are some like dark witch aesthetics, right, which are like cabins out in like Scandinavian places with all of their very, moody-esque pictures with their, black scythe animes and poison herbs growing out in the forest, which was like 5 minutes from their door. And I can sit there and be like, I wish my life was more like that. That looks great. But at the same time, how realistic is it truly? How many filters have been put on it? Is it really like, I've visited Norway a fair bit. Like, depending on where you are in Norway, like it's either like constant summer or like constantly light or constantly dark in the northern half. So getting that really moody lighting in those parts must be really hard, like if it's authentic, because getting that twilight area is really difficult. So it depends where in the world it is, of course. I think that authenticity looks different for different people.
I think for me, the reason I don't tend to post pictures of myself on the page is more because I don't consider, even though it's my page that I run and I made and I post on, I don't consider it a personal social media. So it's not about me talking about myself. It's about me talking about different subjects and issues and teaching and things like that. And it's things that I'm passionate about. And probably every year on my birthday, I'll post a selfie. And usually that's like a swipe through and I'm like, look, take 3. And you're done. Because people ask me, they're like, post more selfies, and I'm like, no. So every now and then I'll just, over the year, whichever have been my best 3, I'll just be like, you can have that in a post, and that's done. I'll see you next year, you know. But I think, but for some people, you know, selfies do represent a part of their authenticity, you know, and that goes with what their account is about, you know, especially if it's more of like an artistic one or creative one that can go down that route. So I definitely think that like it varies account to account, but you can tell, you usually can get a vibe whether someone's more authentic or more not. You know, we discussed this before. I don't really have a problem with people editing in an artistic respect. I try, the only time I don't edit my pictures is when it's actually a product. So if I've like bought some crystals or something, I'll make sure to edit everything except them. For example, like I have a lot of old wooden furniture. I take all my pictures on that. So that'll, you know, that'll sharpen up and things like that. But the actual crystals will stay the same, because if I'm say reviewing a product, I often review products or books. I'm gonna make sure they look representative of what you would expect from that company. You know, and one thing that I tend to do is, part of me being able to review something is being able to know that they give good customer service and that they really mean what they say and they're a good company. So 9 times out of 10, the things you'll see me post about in terms of like objects, I've bought them myself. Because I want to know what, you know, how long do they take to post something, you know, how is it packaged, are they, you know, and often when I buy things, I don't ever go to a company and be like, so I'm planning on buying some of your things and I'm an influencer, so make sure it's all nice and maybe give me some freebies or anything like that. Like, I would just buy something from someone. My name, delivery name is different than my name online is Stephen Aiden. My name is Stephen, but Aiden is something I've chosen. So when they actually deliver, they wouldn't put the 2 and 2 together about names. And so like I'll post it on my page, but they won't know generally unless I become a repeat customer that it's me buying that and I'm going to put it on my account. But I know that there's another side to that. I know that when I first started on Instagram and I was talking to some people, there's a heavy promo culture within. I don't want to say underbelly because it sounds kind of like dark and sinister, but there's an undertone.
There's a dark, sinister side of Instagram, guys. You heard it here first.
I think there's an undertone of like a promo culture. People do reach out to businesses and companies and say, you know, hi, I'm blah blah blah. This is my page. Do you want to send me some stuff and I'll promote it for you? I've done that once, and it honestly felt really alien to me. I think it was a crystal water bottle, and one of my friends got one, who I work with, and they also run an account, so they'd asked them and been like, hey, I can like promo your stuff. So I did, and then honestly I felt so weird about it. I was like, and I think my account at that point was probably about, my following was probably about 4,000. And they were really lovely, and they sent it out and I put it on the page and stuff, like, but it didn't feel right to me. But I'm not saying it's wrong. I really want to put my I don't want to insult people that do ask companies for stuff to review, because I think that there's some people that maybe just want the free things and just be like, I like that necklace, I want that necklace, I'm gonna get that necklace. But there are also some people that be like, I really would love to support you more and I can do that with a review. Do you want to work together? There's very different energies in those statements. So I don't want to criticize people who do reach out to these companies and promote them. It's just not my thing personally. It kind of feels a bit alien for me, because I also feel like, you know, I'm not rich or anything, but I also feel like if I can afford to buy something, I'm going to buy it if I want it. You know, and that's only been a position that I've been comfortable in the last few years. But if if there's something I want, I'd buy. If I look at a crystal, I'll be like, oh, I really want that. I like that seller. They're very ethical. I'm going to buy it. Because I also don't want to take things away from small businesses. A lot of the businesses I buy from are very small. They may be run by 1 or 2 people. Sometimes they're little family businesses, and I know that they're successful, but they're very much on a small scale. And for me, it feels like the right thing to do to financially contribute to that, you know, and support them, because I prefer smaller businesses to larger businesses. You know, if a small business has become a large business, that's fine, you know. But yeah, I mostly look out for the small kind of ethical businesses to actually purchase things from. But I know that's hard as well, because that's not actually within everyone's price range. And you do have sites like you talked about earlier, Wish, that you can type in like any gemstone on there and you'll find it in abundance for like £2 or £3, and it's not always genuine, and it's probably not ethical or ethically mined, but because they're more easily accessible and they are cheaper, people do opt for them quite a lot. But I think I'm running the risk of, I'm going to put the third tangent down now.
Okay. Yeah.
I did that.
Okay. We were talking about this because I have the different perspective on this, because being a small business owner, I do sometimes get approached for that sort of thing, and I just, as a small business owner, I can't really afford to be sending that free stuff out. If I'm in the UK, and if someone is in America, that's immediately around at least £15 postage and pack. Well, just shipping. Just shipping is about £15, and then I have to pack it, and you have to pack it to America, because the UPS over there, oh my God, they are not careful. And there have been some times when people who have ordered things have just been like, I just want to send you a message to let you know that I appreciate how much you packaged everything, because the box that was like this ended up like this because of the US Postal Service, and the only reason things have survived is because you know, packed them so carefully. And I'm like, yep, to America. Oh, but that is something which is, and it puts me in a really awkward position, because I'm like, a lot of small business is based on word of mouth, a lot. And so if somebody is then like, oh well, they're horrible, they refuse to work with me, blah, 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 that can really harm small businesses. And so you try and be like, I'm sorry, I'm really not in a position right now where I can afford to do that. I do things where, like, I will often send people freebies with their order. So I will, you know, I'm happy to be like, oh well, thank you for supporting me, here's free little this or free little that. I do that all the time, and people are like, you didn't have to, and I'm like, haha, try and stop me, because I get like diabolical about sending free stuff apparently. But it's like, I get to know my customers, so I know when quite a few of their birthdays are and things like that, and if they are ordering around their birthday because they've got some more money, I'll stick 3 things in and be like, there you go, happy birthday. And that to me is part of being a small business owner, and I love that. I like getting to know your clients, quote unquote, having a more friendly relationship with them. It's lovely, but I can't afford to be doing it. And sometimes it is really weird when people you have never heard of ever suddenly like email you out of the blue and are like, hey, free stuff, and you're like, I'm sure you mean well, but I can't. Right? Yeah. It is a really weird situation and maybe it's because I'm like, I don't think of my business as being flat out business. Like I obviously run a business, I do the boring business stuff as well, I do the taxes, I have the spreadsheets, I do all of that stuff. I have to. I don't particularly enjoy it. I like the creative side of it. That's what I like to do. And so for me, yeah, it's more of, it's like the business is almost like an extension of me. It's almost like my baby. It's almost like my creative energy out there in the world. So when people are like, can I have some of that for free? And you're like,
yeah, I think it's also because I mean, you might have experienced this, that I think that well, before I had a shop, because my shop that I run, that I co-run is fairly new, and we weren't actually open that long before COVID hit. So, and it's closed now for the time being. But like, before I had any kind of shop or anything, I was still getting messages from people being like, "Hi there," no name or anything like that, even though my name's on my profile. Like, "I really like your brand and what you sell. Like, I would love to collaborate you if you could send me some of your stuff and I will review it." And I'm like, one, this is the most heavily generic message that you've sent to many people, which I don't really appreciate generic messages anyway.
Yeah.
There's nothing tailored or personalized about it. It feels a little bit soulless in terms of like the content. But you know, when I used to get those messages, I used to turn around and be like, "Oh, what is it? What is it that I sell that you really like? You know, what is it you're drawn to?" And it would stump them, and then they'd suddenly realize that I wasn't a shop, but yet they were still messaging me as if I was like a business trying to get product. And I'm like, well, what product is it you're actually after? Because are you just looking at my feed thinking that all of this stuff is for sale when it's actually just my personal collection of things, and just messaging me? And I do get confusion as well, like in terms of people messaging me and like, "Oh, how much is this?" They'll look at a picture, see something I have, and be like, "How much is this?" And I'm like, "Well, mine, but I can show you where I got it if you want. I can find you a link."
I like that you start with, "It's not for you."
It's mine. Although a lot of the things I've got from like thrift shops and stuff, I can't really find where they were from, because they look like they're one-offs or someone made them. You know, sometimes I can be like, right, yeah, this is actually from Nemesis now. Here's a link. You can find them online. You know, and send people away with that. Although people will say to you, "Oh, can you find me a shop in XYZ country that sells it?" I'm like, what? You know, or they ask me to get it for them and send it to them.
Could you buy me this? Yeah, like, no.
Well, people do say things like that though. It's quite odd. I think that yeah, I don't know if we're talking about influencer culture, I don't know if I'm the best example of someone to talk about it, because I don't think I ever intended to end up with the platform that I'm on. I never intended for the size of it to happen.
Mm-hmm.
And I also co-run Witches Society, which has got over 200,000 people on it, and that seems a bit crazy to me as well. Wow, I mean, I say that, but you know, both platforms are losing followers quite quickly at the moment because of political statements. But that's a tangent we won't go down, as we touched on at the beginning. But yeah, where were we?
I want to know who tried to get you to buy them something and what it was.
Well, I guess that leads on to another point. I think that people think that if you have a big page, that you're rich, that you're making money from it. I can't remember if I said this in the last video, but people do message me as though I am a resource that is up at any time of day or night waiting for a message, like you would in a call center, waiting at a computer with a headset, waiting for a call, you know. And I will get people messaging me things like that, and people will assume, if people don't have a larger platform, people assume that anyone who has a larger platform over like 5,000-10,000 is automatically making money from it.
Yeah.
And that Instagram suddenly starts paying you to make content, which they don't. Not for me anyway. You know, I don't have any sponsorship, and I don't take money from people. I don't do any kind of paid ads or anything. But they'll just expect to be like, "Oh, can I, you know, I give you my address and you can send me one." No.
I was sure we were going to get this great story about someone trying to get you to buy them something really strange.
Well, I mean, I would, but that would be tangent number 4.
That's fine.
I had.
This is.
I mean, I did have one person who wanted me to replicate some Book of Shadows pages that I made, because I used to have a project on the go called the Community Book of Shadows, where I just kind of illustrated a book in a fun way. And it was actually it's weird, because I put it in pictures a lot because people love it, but it's that plain black faux leather Book of Shadows with a silver pentacle on the front, which I thought was very readily available. And it is if you look online, but I get messages about that being like, "Where did you get it?" that's one of the ones that people are like, can you send me one? I'll buy one from you, even, like, or people saying, can you send me one, but also fill it, you know? and I don't know, I think it's quite cheeky, but I am one of those people that comes from the mentality of like, don't ask, don't get. So sometimes I'm like, I kind of admire your gusto over that. That's quite, you know, I might have turned around and said yes, but people, I think it's the fact that people assume because you are a bigger page that you're making money and you happily be what they consider to be super generous, when that's not necessarily something you can afford to do or have time to do, because a lot of people demand time from you. Because I think there's a sense that if you're an influencer, it comes part and part with people assuming they have, at least in part, ownership of you and your content,
yeah,
and your time. And I have people expecting me to be able to sit and talk to them for like 8 hours. I get people demanding they call me to talk me through questions, and I make it a point not to call anyone that I don't actually know. So I there have been points where I've got to know people and I have called them, you know, and they've become good friends. But that's not me calling them to be like, right, let me just talk to you about conjuration. Let me just talk to you about how to make your book of shadows.
Teacher,
yeah. And I get that a lot. But I think that's, again, like, there comes a sense that some of your privacy is gone because you have a public platform, and there's certain rules, unwritten rules, I think, for influencers, that they have to be nice all the time, and they have to just accept whatever it is you say. And these are touching on current nerves. People almost forget, like, and the thing that I posted about today is that the people that I found that unfollowing me are people that never supported me in the first place. They were just using me as a resource. And that goes to anyone on the platform that is posting anything about spirituality or the craft or anything like that, and people are saying, you know, I can't believe you're posting about this, I'm leaving. I think it's one of the most privileged and unnecessary things to just announce your departure from a platform. I think it's the inflated sense of self-worth over just being like, you know, if I wouldn't go on a page that has, like, you know, like, maybe I have thousands and thousands of followers and being like, it's really important that I tell all of these people that I personally am leaving because I don't like this message. Now, I'd understand if maybe the message was wrong, was quite a bad message, and like, I'm speaking up against it and being like, you can't say something like that, that's racist, or that's, you know, transphobic, or something. It's something that's that I'm really passionate about. I'll speak up about that. But people don't expect you, when you have like an account that's about one thing, they expect you to only be the one thing. And if you try and be something different, they're like, I'm not used to this. If I don't post a tarot reading for a while, like, people leave, you know.
I've talked to many. I have a few different people who are in the witch community. Have, you know, some of them even have like way bigger accounts than me, and they have been way more pigeonholed than I have, because I've made a point throughout my YouTube career, or whatever you want to call it, of making sure that I cover lots of different subjects. And there are definitely some which people associate with me way more. So people come for the Morrigan stuff, obviously. That is one of the first things. Or shadow work. People will come and talk about shadow work and things like that. But I do have a variety of videos on purpose and a variety of content on purpose. I do then struggle because it's not as easy to market or influence, because I don't have one generic aesthetic, maybe, or like, this is a doorway which you would recognize as being this influencer on site, so you know what you're getting, right? Apparently there is a vibe that is me that people recognize, and I'm like, okay. I'm not quite sure what that means, but all right. But like, there's some people in it's even like certain colors, and you immediately associate them with certain witches within the community, and you recognize them. Like, you'll recognize the ones that have the darker aesthetics, the more gothic aesthetics, the more moody lighting, and then people who have the beautiful, bright, artistic, intricate imagery and things like that. So I for example, Molly Roberts, who I love, and I know her, she's my friend, but she has this art witch aesthetic which you can't mistake. It's her on a page and you know it's her. Whereas I'm trying to think of some people who are in like on Instagram with dark aesthetic names.
I don't know if mine's quite dark. I think mine's fairly dark. It was darker.
Well, you're very orderly though. You're very Virgo with your little boxes with the quotes in them and the little borders around the outside. Yeah. And I'm immediately like, I know that's Virgo because of this. Very like, here is my well presented information. Now the lines in it might be like sucker punch to people, but you won't get that straight away. You'll be like, oh, look at the nice little lines and the nice little border, and then like bang with whatever's in the middle. Like, yeah, there you go. That's Virgo.
I think you're right there. I think you've got lots of different themes, and it becomes almost like a signature, doesn't it? And I think that doesn't apply just to like spiritual and witchy accounts. So you know, it's like you can watch a film. If you watch a clip of a film, you would be able to tell that it was Tim Burton, for example. Like you can recognize the style, and it's the same with people online. And I think that's again part of like branding. And branding's a really tricky word when I think it comes to the influencer community. Especially because I think actually like it's a very normal word to talk about if say you're a cosmetics influencer, which is one of the biggest influencer fields there is. You know, hair and beauty, makeup, all of the kind of things. That's, you know, $1 billion industry, even the influencers together. But when it comes to the witchy, the pagan, the spiritual scene, I actually think that people hate the word brand. And I can see why, because I don't really like to use it that much. But in terms of like translating what you do to a social media landscape and language, you know, I think that sometimes people who I think should have elevated platforms, there's so many people I really deeply respect online that are authors, that are teachers, people that I really look up to. And I think to myself, it's crazy that they don't have thousands and thousands of more followers, because I think they're amazing and they have so many good messages to say. But again, that's because I think that as a community, we're quite against using social media tools to create to our advantage, to actually create like a brand for ourselves. Because somehow it's seen as no longer being authentic to that whole gritty witchcraft, you know, that deep feeling in your chest that would somehow be damaged by then creating a platform that's a lot more attractive or a lot more ordered. And you know, there are so many, I don't really mind, and it's not really something I look for, that if when I'm looking as to whether or not I'm going to follow a page, as to whether or not it's neat, tidy, ordered, pretty, ugly, none of those things matter to me. I follow the person and their content, but I know not everyone who's on platforms follow people for the content. You know, somebody could have written reams and reams of really useful information, or be making loads of useful videos, but there's the unwritten rules of the influencer culture that even people who aren't influencers are kind of trained to recognize what they feel looks like an influencer from what their page looks like. And I think that is to the detriment of people in the community, in our community, that I think should be elevated to more and get more exposure. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the thing with, I think we talked a little bit about brand, and the whole point of that is recognition. So you get a snapshot of something and you recognize it as belonging to this makeup artist or whoever, and so it kind of gets across an element of their vibe, and that can be so difficult, I think, for witches, because witchcraft is so personal that for a lot of us, we don't want to create an image of this thing that is deeply personal, because it's almost like taking it out of it's like I'm taking a bit out of my soul and putting it on the table, and you're only seeing this tiny little bit, and it doesn't explain everything. It doesn't even give you a real idea of how I feel about it. It's not my entire experience. It's not rich, it's not deep, it's not all of these things that matter to me. It's this tiny little like thing that I put out on social media, and I don't feel comfortable with that. And some people, I've known people who can't get behind advertising at all, even though they sell services, even though they sell things, and they struggle with the idea of advertising flat out. Like they hate it. And the way that I've been approaching it is I'm like, well, don't make an advert, you make an introduction. You don't make an advert, you tell a little story. You don't make an advert, you sort of are reaching out to people who need what it is that you're providing. And so there is that really interesting discrepancy between, I think, what people feel and then like allowing people in, almost like, because it's like with a lot of witchcraft, what we've been talking about is sometimes people are expecting way more than they should be because you're a face online, because you're an influencer or whatever, right? And with a lot of witchcraft, a lot of it's personal, and you're not going to want to share that, and you're not going to want to talk about it. Or if you do want to talk about it, you want to talk about it in an atmosphere you're comfortable with, to the degree that you want to. So you might record a video saying you have your talking points and you're not going any deeper than that, or you know at this point you want to stop. Or you're not ready to talk about certain elements of something yet, so you wait until you are ready. Whereas like in the influencer culture, there is this kind of like grabby hands thing that can happen, which is like more, and you were talking about it a little bit as well. And I sometimes get people who, like, same as you, I get people who messaging me at all times of the night, all times of the weekend, and you know, most people don't respond at the weekends. Like, they will work Monday to Friday and you message them at the weekend and no. But I get people who will flat out like send me 100 messages at the weekend, and I am bad because I'm a Virgo, so I'm like, oh, I'll just respond a little bit and, you know, answer the one question, because they paid for the service. That's usually what it is. They paid for services, and then they want more and more and more and more and more. And after a certain point, I'm like, if you want any more, then you need to book a reading or whatever. But like, I try not to be a complete, like, don't want to be heartless either, because like I understand that people, you know, have questions following like readings and stuff that they maybe don't think of in the immediate, like when I ask them, is there anything else you want to know, and they can't think of anything, because I've put them on the spot a little bit. And I'm like, well, if you think of anything in the next couple of days, just send me an email or something. I don't mind that. But then some people are like, the next thing and the next thing and the next thing and the next thing and the next thing.
Yeah, there's a difference in that, I think, because when I do readings, I get that same thing. I'll ask people if they have any questions about any of it. Sometimes they just won't respond, and they'll respond like 2 weeks later with, thank you, I'm so sorry I didn't reply, it just made me emotional and it meant a lot and I just couldn't find the words. And I'll be like, that's fine. But then you get people who be like, oh, you know, when you talked about this, is there anything more you got with that, or can you expand on that a little bit? It's a bit confusing. And I'll be like, right, and I'll reword it or add some bits. Sometimes that's tricky because you have to put yourself back in that energetic space. I very rarely remember readings that I do because the messages aren't for me. Like, it doesn't belong to me, it's them, and it's personal to them, so it doesn't stay with me. And I think that's the same with a lot of readers. You know, somebody would tell me, oh, you know that thing that you said? Well, yeah, this and this and this, and oh my God, it was amazing. And I'm like, what did I say?
Yeah.
And it's deliberately because that's not, message is not for me. But then you'll get people that then try and tangent off of your readings to get more and more and more. So if you know, they might have asked about something specific like work, and then they'll come back to you and be like, that's really great, so now let's talk about love. And I'm like, that's cool, but you need to then book something different, because that's different. I can't look at the same cards that I drew for you because you asked about career or you asked about this, and then use those same cards to get a reflection of you and this new situation that you're bringing up. And people will try and, because they've paid you once, they assume they can want more and more. But to be honest, I rarely get that. The people that actually have for readings are actually so beautiful and lovely. and I've made some strong connections through them as well. And that's for me, because I don't really advertise them. They're on my highlights, but that gets word of mouth as well. But in the larger, when I've actually done readings in person, say like at holistic fairs, you get more of those kind of people that will then ask about something else and something else and something else. Some of that I do feel is like a 50-50%. If someone doesn't come from a background where they understand the intricacies of what it means to do a reading, or the intuition side of it and the psychic side of it, like they don't understand that. They think that when you're reading them, you get their whole life in front of you, and that's not necessarily the case. So part of it is that kind of they just don't know, and that's fine, you know. But sometimes you get the people who deliberately go around in these spiritual circles to try and get as much as they can from people, to be a drain on people's as a resource. And that I think is, and maybe that's a fear that some people have online, because, and maybe that's why they don't have or want a bigger presence than they do have. But then, you know, I was saying earlier, I didn't ever expect my platform to get to where it is now. It was never strategically
He's an
planned.
accidental influencer, guys. Accidental.
Yeah, that's what people call me, an accidental influencer, because I became one just from doing things that I liked, which is actually, maybe they kind of influenced a dream in a way. So I feel really lucky for that, because, you know, but also we're in a niche. Like our community is very small compared to, say, the cosmetics industry, you know, or the clothing industry, the fashion industry. And one of the points we were going to bring up was about younger people and being an influencer, and how nowadays it actually, on one side of it, for some people it's a legitimate job, and people get paid for sponsorship, people get paid and sent items, you know, like here's a few outfits, we're going to pay you $300 to show them in a couple of pictures, and people do make a steady amount of money through that. However, I think the impression some of the younger generation have got is that this is very easily achievable, and especially in industries like the cosmetics and fashion, like it's really not. It's not easily achievable, especially
it's
because
as well.
It is bad.
It's a really strange one, because the evolution of jobs in general is very weird, and like probably from the millennials downwards, like the way that jobs kind of worked almost like dramatically shifted. Because I know, like, you had the rise of the YouTubers, for example, and that was largely gaming. You did have the beauty industry on there as well, but gaming was a massive one. And you have people like, you know, PewDiePie and things like this, and they're millions of pounds, right? Millions. They're doing well. And even now they're still doing well, even though that's been clamped down on by places like YouTube and all the rest of it. But people do find these really strange ways to create careers in ways that didn't exist 10, 20, 50 years ago. And I think influencing is like, and the influencer is the latest thing of that. And for every massive success story, you're going to have hundreds of people who don't make money out of it, who don't manage to get that way. And that's true of business in general. Like, I run a witch shop, and people are like, how do you do that, how do you do that, blah blah blah. And the truth of it is something like, out of all startup self-owned businesses, like something ridiculous fail. I think it's like 80% fail. I could be wrong on the exact number.
I think I've had the same fact, actually.
It's a very high percentage, though, of people that, you know, fail. And people come to me and they're like, well, how do you keep it going? How do you make it going? And I'm like, well, I can tell you what some of the things that I did, but it doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to be right for you, because you're not me. And apart from anything, Virgo works a fucking ridiculous amount of hours compared to most people. My brain is always going. And I've always got, like, I'm always 100 steps ahead of what I want for the next week. I know I want this and this and this and this on Monday, and this and this and this and this on Tuesday, and then I add to that because I haven't got enough work, so I add to my workload. And so people might think, oh, it's really easy, you just sell spiritual items, that's really super easy, you don't do it. And I'm like, if you knew how much work I did, love, you wouldn't be thinking it was easy at all. And I'm assuming that's exactly the same for a lot of the really, you know, the influencers. And there's kind of like this dual thing that happens. There's being in the right place at the right time with the right thing, which is an element of luck for certain. Like, and sometimes you just get big off that, and you're there at the right time, and your face is right, or the words that you're saying is right, and poof, and there you go. And that's why sometimes you watch these things that are blown up and you're like, why on earth did this blow up? I don't understand. Like, people are trying to analyze it after the fact, right, to try and get big themselves. Like, that doesn't make any sense. And no, because you're not looking at it from that time, that space, that energy, that conversation that was being had right there and then. So it's very difficult, I think, to replicate that formula, and people want the formula. People want the formula of how did you become an influencer with this many followers, how did you get to this point, how did you get to that point. And it's really difficult to talk to people about it, because it's not like the stereotypical way of doing business, even outside of our niche. Because when you work in a spiritual niche, it's really weird in terms of business. Like,
yeah,
it's there are 100 ways of doing it, none are wrong. Some are going to work for certain individuals and not for others, just because of who you are as a person. I've seen like, it's really interesting that I've noticed I do really, really well on Instagram, generally speaking. I mean, I'm not as good as Mr. Influencer over there by any stretch of the imagination, but I do all right on Instagram, and I like Instagram because of the image of aesthetic, being able to showcase products and tell a story. I like that a lot. Whereas, like, for whatever reason, some of the YouTube videos just don't do as well, and that drives me insane, because some of them I think are really, really helpful and really useful. I put out this video which people have been asking me for years to do, because every time I've told someone about this, they're like, oh my god, I never thought of that, that's great, you need to tell everybody. So I made a video, and what it is a smoke-free way of using loose smudges or loose incenses, which is to use, you know, if you get an oil burner with the little tea light in it, and you put beeswax or something in it, melt that down, and then put your smudge in, there you go. And it's better than burning on a charcoal disc for a number of different reasons, in enclosed spaces, whole lot less smoke, you get a much more delicate balance of fragrance, it lasts longer, all these good things about using it. And that video has like 500 views on it, and I'm like,
I noticed a big difference, I think, after Facebook took over Instagram. I do, out of morbid curiosity, I do tend to check statistics on my page. I like to know, it gives, because I've got a I think it's classed as like a business content creator account. It's completely free to get, like, it's just, you just tweak your account, but it gives you statistics, like, you know, the balance in people's genders who follow you, or age groups and things like that. And one thing is interesting to see, that the majority of my followers are actually in my age bracket.
Mine are.
So I think it's something, I think the age bracket is like 24 to 35 or 24 to 34 or something like that. Or even 28, I can't remember, but it's there, and it's like the middle one. And it's interesting to see those stats, because it's since I started the account, it's actually been, even before I posted my first selfie on it, the people following me are actually in my age group, in my bracket. And I actually only have, I think it's about 2% of people who are under 18 on my page, which it doesn't translate to that many people, actually, to be fair. And then I've got a few different percents. I'll try and bring it up. I quite like those statistics, but what I did notice is before I'm going to be open about it, like, statistic wise, before Facebook took over, an average post of mine, because the post will tell you when you swipe up on it in the stats, like how many people it reached, how many people like saw it, it talks about how many people interacted with it. It also tells you how many people saw that post and then followed you afterwards, which is quite an interesting statistic. And I think that can be quite useful for businesses.
Yeah.
But on average, a post of mine before Facebook took over was getting around 100 to 700 new followers per post that I made. And the count now is roughly about 5 to 30 because of the way the new the algorithms in place that try and force any account to pay for advertising and to pay for exposure. And I think what that means is that people who are now just starting accounts in this new Instagram landscape, for example, and you mentioned before about YouTube being a bit stricter, saying you have to make videos shorter and shorter and shorter. People starting now will get so disillusioned because so many of the accounts that are larger got the bulk of their following from before all the changes. And I'm gonna hold my hands up and say, if I started the same account now with the same pictures, but I started tomorrow from day one and went on and did however 600 posts or whatever I've done, I wouldn't end up with the same following that I have now from when I started. And I know a lot of accounts that started around the same time as me that ended up getting in that slipstream, not intentionally. It's just the way the platform worked back then. Like they didn't cut visibility based on anything you talked about or hashtags or anything like that in terms of like witchy things. So if I started it now, like if somebody is just starting out and they want to be like a witchy influencer, because I get a lot of messages from people who have said like, I really want an account that helps to teach. I really want an account that helps to showcase spell work and things like that. And they're asking for tips. And, you know, one of the tips I give them is just please don't feel bullied into paying for advertising. You know, you won't see results overnight. The new landscape is such that you're going to have to really just make sure you're posting regularly, make sure you're being yourself, and make sure that you actually like what you're posting and you're not just posting things just because you feel like they're going to get you followers or get you likes. But to be honest, I can't give people that much advice because it's never really been my intention to get to the place that I have. But I know that because of the amount of younger people coming up, you know, feeling this is the legitimate job that they want to do. You know, when I was a kid, I wanted to be an archaeologist. There are kids that are turning around at like 8 or 9 and being like, well, I want to be an influencer. That's what I want to do now. And they're making it harder and harder and harder to actually achieve that as a goal, that probably less than 1% of them will be successful, especially if they've picked a huge field. I think if you're in a very niche environment, like the spiritual community, I think the spiritual community is getting bigger on the whole, but I think the witch community is actually quite small, whereas the overarching spiritual community is a lot bigger. You know, but it's not as competitive for a business as it would be if you were making clothing or makeup or something like that. And you will get people, and this is again where the authenticity comes in, because you will get so many different businesses that all make candles, and those candles might be infused with crystals and herbs. And you know, I saw a huge full-on like online argument between several candle accounts all claiming they invented putting crystals in candles. And you know, people are going to make similar products. People are going to, because as witches we use similar tools to each other, so therefore the inspirations and the things that we might make could be similar. Like a lot of people make intention oils, a lot of people make anointing oils, a lot of people make candles and wands, you know. But what you're actually buying from that person when you are paying, or when you're contributing to their business, you're actually buying their authenticity and their energy, and you're buying their creativity in that thing. Because you could go to a few different places and buy candles, you know, but it depends on who you want to get them from. That I think is where the differences lie, if that makes sense.
And it's not to say people don't flat off with people off either in the spiritual community, because people do, and I've had it happen to me a few times, and I never know what to do with it because it's horrible. And it's horrible in the spiritual community if you have put your heart and soul into something and then you find that people are like making rip-offs of it and selling it for, you know, $1 less or whatever. It can be really disheartening and really upsetting. So it does happen. Yeah, but it's like you can buy candles, you can buy scented candles from the pound shop if you want to. But I mean, it won't be the same thing, and it won't have the same effect as buying spiritually. But yeah, you can do it. We're probably about time, because we have gone on.
I think we've covered everything other than the one point where you can, yeah, that's it. So like the last point is that actually, if you're coming to an account and you're looking at different accounts and you're deciding who to follow, you need to be conscious, because a lot of these people will have bought followers, because they make it, there's a lot of accounts, there's a lot of businesses making money on claiming to be improving your Instagram account, and they'll use terms like will grow your account organically. That's they keep saying organically, and 9 times out of 10 what it is they have thousands and thousands of bot accounts that they've made that look kind of like real accounts. They look kind of like people who've posted like 2 pictures of themselves and nothing else, but they'll make these accounts and they'll follow your account from those accounts. So like you can suddenly get a massive boost in following. Someone could have like 300,000 followers because a lot of this is bought, and you can tell from the comments usually. What I've seen is that you can find repeating comments, or the same comment, someone be like, oh, I love this so much, and then a certain string of emojis, but then that will then appear on different ones of their posts, the exact same phrase with the exact same emojis, but from either the same account or different accounts saying the same thing. And I think that's a lot of the time, that's also tricking small businesses. If you don't know what you're looking for, it can be really damaging. That you can feel like you should be giving your products to this person who's asking for them because you'll get all this exposure, but really, in reality, their 300,000 followers only represent about 300 people that actually genuinely followed them, rather than the bot accounts, for example. So I think that's such a dark thing to do, to make an account, to buy followers, and then to use that to convince small businesses that you're going to promote their products, when really they're going to see no return from that. And it's literally just for the fact that they want some freebies. And again, I just want to put out that I'm not saying that everyone who asks to help out businesses is doing it because they want the freebies and they're in it just for themselves. There's a lot of people out there who genuinely want to support other businesses. So I don't think they're not all bad at all. There's just a few that I think give people a bad name. But overall, it's a deeply complicated issue. I think there's a lot of different facets to it.
There is.
If I'm doing Jerry's final thoughts on the matter.
Virgo's final thoughts. That could take a while. But we will kind of round up there, because we've gone over an hour again. But I hope you guys enjoyed this. If you have any questions, you can of course pop them down below. We will do our best to get back to you. And Stephen's been getting back to people on the other video as well. So if you have any questions for Stephen, you can ask them down below, and he will see them.
And if you are a business and you get these kind of messages, like, I'd be curious to see how other people handle it as well.
Yeah, that would be interesting actually. Yeah, because it can be really difficult to know what to do with them.
Yeah, for sure.
Cool. Well, as always, it's lovely to talk to you, and we will be doing this again, no doubt, because we think we've got a Virgo list of things we can talk about somewhere. So talk to you very, very soon, and we'll catch you guys soon. Many blessings, guys.
Bye.